Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, talking about today's hottest rental type. Then, my favorite guest is here on Milestone Episode 300 because that guest is you, as I help with your listener questions about your rental property operations. Then, why money is a taboo topic? Why do people hide their salary? And finally, a little Episode 300 bonus, all today on Get Rich Education. Fortunately for you, Congress has made it possible to get up to $200,000 out of your current 401k or TSP to invest in real estate or your own business, and that's even if you're still working. The thing is, you can get all this money tax-free. The EQRP is your secret weapon. With the CARES Act expiring soon, the EQRP company helps you unleash your retirement funds now. Learn more and text message QRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Hey, you're inside GRE from Phoenix, Arizona to Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is that show that's created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. You're listening to Milestone Episode 300 of Get Rich Education. More on that later. The hottest income property housing type today could very well be single-family rental homes that have many small bedrooms. 4 bedrooms is often better than 3. 3 is better than 2. Yeah, today a high number of small bedrooms is being favored over fewer large bedrooms. For one thing, this is because as the economy is in a rough patch, more people seek roommates to share housing costs. Also, with more people working from home now, they want the extra bedroom for quiet office privacy. You probably already understand that more residents prefer single-family rentals over apartments in order to avoid common areas like laundry rooms and hallways and even elevators in some properties. Another reason boosting single-family rental demand today is something that you might be overlooking when it comes to rental property, because often you're thinking about things that are inside the property, like amenities and square footage and layout. But another reason renters increasingly want single-family rentals are yards. Now, sometimes duplexes might have a fenced yard for each side too, of course, but why are yards more desired today? Well, there are a few reasons. In the pandemic, people have discovered gardening like the hunter-gatherers did. Yeah, gardening as a hedge against these disruptions in the food supply chain. In fact, Burpee Seed Company recently had the highest sales in its 144-year history. People are gardening. In fact, the Homeowners Association in my own neighborhood recently put it to a vote among residents about okaying having a second detached building in your backyard. Only one maximum is allowed now, and that's because more people want to have a greenhouse today. So gardens and greenhouses, well, these are most conducive to single-family housing types. People are even buying egg-laying chickens like never before. It's kind of a back-to-basics subculture that's emerging and evolving here. Yes, humans are mammals, and mammals need sustenance. You need food, and you need real estate. In the midst of the great shutdown, people want to do more with their lawns. Lowe's and Home Depot are doing really well, and they're selling home dwellers a lot of things like inflatable pools and patio furniture and trampolines. And then back indoors, yeah, you may very well want to tilt your new property buys into single-family residences, and if possible, with more small bedrooms. Sometimes older single-family homes can have 4 or even 5 or more bedrooms. One reason for that is that families had more children generations ago than they do now. Family sizes are smaller now. So if you still have a 4 or 5 bedroom place, it can work well for either roommates or home offices. If you're the hands-on type, well then building a wall to divide a large bedroom has rarely been more lucrative than it's been lately. Now, one 300 square foot bedroom, that's pretty big. Dividing it into two bedrooms of 150 square feet each, that is paying off more than it has in the past. So there are some housing trends in the pandemic. Demand for more single-family rentals with more small bedrooms and a yard for a garden. In the pandemic, the broader economy is getting bailed out more often than a bank behaving badly. It's not just quantitative easing, dropping interest rates on every loan type, or loosening bank reserve requirements, or putting free checks into unemployed people's hands. Many real estate investors are getting support almost like you had opened your own GoFundMe account. Low supply is keeping housing prices buoyant. Low mortgage rates are keeping demand high. Forbearance keeps borrowers from defaulting, so that further supports prices. And of course, that hasn't helped out everybody. Those are general trends. Now, the debt to income ratio requirement is positioned to be removed from qualified mortgages. What does this really mean? Well, this means that borrowers that have higher existing monthly debt payments on everyday things like their car or their credit cards, they could now qualify for new mortgage loans when they could not previously. Well, what this does is that it creates a larger buyer pool. More people have this capacity to qualify and buy property when you eliminate the DTI. Well, this larger buyer pool, this serves to further push up real estate prices, and that's for both investment property and for primary residences. Well, eliminating the DTI, that's great news if you want to lock up more property at these historically low interest rates, but there can be too much of a good thing. It's a call to vigilance to be sure we don't return to those loosey-goosey days of, say, 2005. That's when virtually anyone with a name and a signature could get a loan. Borrowers outright lied about their income on loan applications sometimes, and that income was not checked. It was not even confirmed in underwriting. So then people with historically low-paying jobs back then, like movie theater ushers and dishwashers and pedicurists, they could sometimes own a fairly lavish home. Well, when appreciation stopped in 2007, liar borrowers had no equity to remove for servicing the payments, and that whole thing did not end very well. We're nowhere near that point, but watch that pendulum swing. If you're buying for resilient cash flow, well, you're not so price sensitive anyway. The first one of your listener questions comes from Chad in Saline, Michigan. Keith, I like your easy to remember Vim-Tum explanation of expenses, but why are you excluding CapEx expenses from the cash flow calculation? Okay, thanks for the question, Chad. Let me translate if you, the listener, are uninitiated on this. The easy way to remember how to calculate your monthly cash flow is to take your rental income and subtract out your mortgage, that's principal and interest, and subtract out your operating expenses, which I like to call your VIMTUM, V-I-M-T-U-M. That's just an acronym I use for your regularly recurring operating expenses, and VIMTUM stands for vacancy, insurance, maintenance, taxes, utilities, and management, V-I-M-T-U-M. What Chad is asking about are CapEx, which is a shorthand way of saying capital expenditures. CapEx means large, irregular expenses that an investor or even a homeowner often incurs with your property over longer periods of time. An example is what happens when your roof needs to be replaced. A lot of roofs have a 25-year life expectancy. Now your property's water heater has more like a 10-year life expectancy. That's a CapEx expenditure as well. Chad is basically asking me how I'm accounting for that when figuring cash flow. I think I addressed this on a prior episode, but if I did, it's been a long time, so I'll bring a fresh angle to the answer. First of all, I've previously mentioned that it is prudent to keep 3 to 5% of the total value of your property portfolio in a liquid side fund. So if all of your properties are worth $1 million, you'd have 30 to 50K in cash or cash equivalents. If you've just got your, say, first turnkey at $100,000, have 3 to 5K set aside. Note that when you qualify for a mortgage in the first place, Mortgage loan underwriting typically requires that you have reserves already. And by the way, this liquid side fund that you have, this should be in addition to any overall liquid emergency fund that you have in your life. But Chad, on your CapEx question, you might still be thinking, yes, I want to take some of those dollars that you felt compelled to put in a liquid side fund account monthly, and I want to factor that into my property ROI. I get that. Here's the thing. If you follow along really with this entire wealth formula espoused here on the show, your CapEx expense should be limited. You're going to pay less in CapEx expenses over time than other investors. And why is that? It's because at the 8 to 10 year mark, which is before a lot of major CapEx items need attention, you're going to sell your property and 1031 exchange it up into the next one, or hopefully into two properties at that point. This is all driven by the fact that after most any 10-year slice in the housing market, you're going to have appreciation, therefore accumulated equity. And as you know, home equity is unsafe, illiquid, and its rate of return is always zero. So it's really due to math and your loss of leverage that makes you move your property along before CapEx expenses kick in. And with single family rentals, you can sell that property to an owner occupant buyer that typically gets emotions behind the purchase of that home. And they're not that concerned that you were the one that enjoyed the new roof in its first 10 years of use or whatever. Now, if you have substantial equity accumulation after 10 years on a property that performs really well, and you do want to hold on to it, well, then you might do a cash out refi and have CapEx expenses like a new water heater. So thanks for your excellent question, Chad. One other thing I'd like to mention that a lot of real estate people don't like to talk about are, in general, run your cash flow projections fairly conservatively. That is because in real estate, unexpected expenses are more common than unexpected income. Thanks, Chad. The next question comes from Lori in Pasadena, California. Lori says, Keith, I love listening to you. You've got the most relevant real estate show out there. Wow, thanks for that. Things are going fairly well with the properties that I buy through GREturnkey.com. But with each buy, I get more and more of these various letters in the mail that I have to deal with. She goes on to say, the latest one is an annual property rental fee statement from Florida. Things like this continue to cut into my time. And then Lori goes on to give another example. Okay, Lori, yeah, what she's talking about here is that the Florida municipality, the town where her rental single-family home is located, they have this annoying little administrative charge. They charge a whole $50 per year to Lori for this property because she's an out-of-area investor that has the quote-unquote privilege of owning Florida rental property in this town. So this is basically like a tax excised by the town where Lori owns her property. What something like this really is, Lori, is a nuisance. Just you having to read the form and figure out what it is and seeing how that Florida town accepts payments. That is annoying. That cuts into your time. In fact, I got a piece of nuisance mail for one of my apartment buildings yesterday, and this one is from a utility provider, the natural gas provider to the building, in fact. Basically, the natural gas company is working on a high-pressure gas transmission pipeline, and the right-of-way for the pipeline is apparently within 1/8 of a mile of this apartment building of mine. The letter said that the property residents should be informed. Well, Lori, with the piece of nuisance mail that you received about your Florida property and this one that I got on my apartment building, here's what you do. Get it out of your life. Get that nuisance mail out of your life. Now, I don't mean throw it away. This all comes down to one word. This is really a one-word answer for all this, and that word is manager. What I did when I got this notice was get out my phone, I took a photo of this letter, sent the letter image to my property manager right away. I asked them to handle it, and I also asked the manager to make sure to tell that letter sender that any future correspondence like this be sent to the manager, not to me. Therefore, I will never be involved again. You know what we just did, Lori, when we do this? we both just increased our ROTI. Yeah, we just increased that all important investor metric that's even more important than ROI. ROTI is your return on time invested. I'm a big proponent of having a professional property manager. Remember, it's their job to handle communications with your residents like this, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. So remember to outsource these little nuisances to your property manager. And Lori, I don't know how many properties you have, but just say that you have a total of 10 rental doors. Well, with a portfolio that size, some months you might have what investors call a perfect month. That is, a month with zero repairs or maintenance in your portfolio. But whenever you do, at times you might wonder, yeah, well, what did I really even pay the manager for this month then? Well, you still paid your manager to collect the rent and pay your bills and itemize your statements and just have that peace of mind that your tenants cannot get a hold of you directly at an inconvenient time. But ensuring that your manager handles all of your nuisance notices such that you don't even know that you got one, that increases your return on time invested. So be that responsible owner. We want to do good in the world. You want a nuisance tax notice to get paid. You want your tenants to be informed about nearby utility work, but be sure that it's outsourced so that you maintain your quality of life. Like I'm fond of saying, be sure that your quality of life exceeds your cost of living. So the bottom line is use your manager. Thanks for the question, Lori. The next question is from Brian in Austin, Texas. Brian says, hi, Keith. I am an investor with $7 million in value across 32 properties. Yeah, nice job there, Brian. I noticed you are not promoting coffee and cacao any longer and was curious if there was concern or a reason behind it. Okay, thanks, Brian. Brian, what he's referring to is that at greturnkey.com, where our list of cash flowing property providers is, there used to be a page for coffee investing there and a page for cacao investing there, and neither are currently there. Brian, what happened is that with a provider there, and it's the same provider for both types of agricultural investment, that is, where you, the investor, get cash flow from the annual harvest of coffee and cacao, is that that provider has trouble with the deeding process where those parcels are located, namely in Panama. The provider, they are still delivering the land deeds to all of the investors, but working with the municipality there, that's taking so long that this drawn out deeding process was frustrating to some investors. In fact, it might have taken me something like 2 years to get my deeds for my coffee farm parcels. I don't really remember exactly how long it was, but it took a while. Anyway, those offerings, they're not currently on greturnkey.com because the provider is changing their model, and they're doing this partly because of the slow deeding process. So what they're really doing is they're listening to your input and they're responding. They're changing their model. They're doing really what you would want them to do. So they're moving to a private placement model. That way they can issue the share certificates in a matter of weeks, not years like it is with the deeds. And that way they can focus their time and effort on actually developing and growing and operating the agricultural real estate business. Another is that under the deeded model, they could not accept IRA funds any longer. So expect coffee and cacao to be back on greturnkey.com at a later time. That's why they're not there now. There aren't any more deeded parcels available, and they are changing their model. But of course, they're still working on getting the deeds for those that have bought those farm parcels in the last few years and still don't have their deeds. The main reason that you'll see a provider be removed from greturnkey.com is that they have run out of inventory in that market. This happens as demand keeps exceeding supply. And if a provider doesn't have inventory and they're not actively sourcing it, well, then there's no reason to waste your time and have it there at greturnkey.com. That is all for our listener question portion today. Home prices for April grew 5.5% year over year despite the pandemic. Yes, real estate is slow moving, and we're still looking at April data here near midsummer, and there's a lag time there. That article's in the show notes for you. My guess is that I wouldn't really expect an appreciation rate that high over the next year, but one thing that is supporting prices are those erstwhile mentioned low interest rates that are even lower than the ocean floor at this point. Let's look at mortgage interest rates decade by decade. It's really interesting to parse it this way. This is just remarkable. It gives you some perspective, sort of like a while ago when I played those cornball television commercial ads from the 1980s where you could finance a car at an 11% APR, and that was touted as some great deal. Let's look at the average 30-year fixed owner-occupied mortgage rate that was issued in the decade of the 1970s. It was 8.9 then. That was the average rate, and inflation was increasing. By the 1980s decade, inflation had reached a crescendo. This was the Volcker era, where Fed Chair Paul Volcker famously raised interest rates to try to stomp out runaway inflation, and Volcker's bold move was successful, but this helped result in a 1980s decade mortgage rate of 12.7%. Gosh, 12.7% for the decades-long average. By the 1990s, they settled down to 8.1%. By the 2000s decade, down to 6.3%. And yeah, that sounds about right. I bought my first ever property in 2002 at right about that rate. It was a 6 3/8% rate. By the 2010s decade, we had low interest rates to pull us out of the Great Recession, and they stayed low. In fact, the average for the 2010s decade was 4.1%. That felt unprecedented at the time. Well, today, take another full percentage point off that, yet mortgage interest rates are 3.1% today as we're here early in the 2020s decade. Gosh, astonishing, 3.1%. Now, interest rates correlate with inflation. So today, we're in a low inflation environment and hence a low interest rate environment. Well, coming up here on the show next week, one of the world's most prominent economists will be on the show with me, and we're going to discuss inflation versus deflation. Which side is winning and what is going to happen next? Of course, we'll discuss the state of the broader real estate economy and so much more as well. That's next week. I hope that you're doing well. We've been largely sheltering in place here at our home in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm coming to you from Anchorage today. Next week, if all goes as planned, it's an awkward time for cross-continental travel, but I'll be flying in to Buffalo, New York, and then spending a good chunk of this month in both Western New York State and mostly Pennsylvania as I'm visiting family. I think I've told you before that I feel like I won the parent lottery. My terrific parents have lived in the same upstate Pennsylvania home since 1974. They've also had the same phone number all that time, all 46 years. And when I visit them, I still sleep in my same bedroom that I slept in as a baby. I love Kurt and Penny Weinhold, and I am so grateful and inspired by their example of goodness and stability. As far as events, if you want to meet in person, I had hoped to do meetups in New York City and Philadelphia this summer, as well as a Harrisburg, Pennsylvania real estate field trip, but COVID has wiped out all of that. Of course, as always, you can keep up to date on all of that at getricheducation.com/events. Some other live speaking events have gone virtual. For example, I'll no longer be speaking in person in Birmingham, Alabama at the Spartan Summit this coming October, but I will be speaking at the virtual version of their event. In fact, I'll be the speaker kicking off the Spartan Summit. Again, learn more at getricheducation.com/events. And I hope to do some or all of the in-person New York City, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg events next year. For milestone episode 300 here, do you like the Get Rich Education theme music at all? Or did you at least wonder where the now familiar to you music comes from? Well, we don't purport to be any type of music channel. This is an investing show, but this one time for episode 300, we're going to play all of it. It's 2 minutes long. We'll play that at the end of the show today. We own the royalty-free track. This show launched Get Rich Education in 2014, and this track has been our theme music since 2017. It's from a DJ named Wixford, and it's called Cannot Be Stopped. But first, why don't people talk about money Why are other people so secretive about their salary? Why is money considered a taboo topic then? Anyway, that's next. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to the Wealth Building Get Rich Education. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the #1 lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. Property investors can get killed with maintenance costs. That's less likely when you buy brand new construction. Let me tell you about JWB Real Estate Capital in bustling Jacksonville, Florida. They pioneered the build-to-rent model where you can invest in new construction, turnkey rental property. That's why JWB was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. To learn more and see inventory, start now at newconstructionturnkey.com.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. And the reason I respect Keith, he's a very strong, smart, bright young man.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. You're listening to Milestone episode 300. We've been talking about some of your harder real estate investing skills today. Well, what about mindset? Why don't people talk about money? Why is money a taboo topic? One of those things that you just don't talk about. It's taboo stuff right up there with politics, sex, and religion. Well, if people would stop equating self-worth with net worth, then talking about money would not be this big taboo thing. According to a survey conducted by Ally Bank, 70% of Americans think that it's rude to talk about money. Just get this. Research shows that people would rather talk with a stranger about an STD than their salary. Oh, jeez. You'd rather tell someone that you have an STD rather than that they know how much you make? People would rather admit to contracting gonorrhea than fessing up that they only make $54,000 a year? Sheesh. Oh, gosh. And did I really just use that word on the show, especially here on Milestone episode 300? So, well, why this society-wide gag rule? Why does this taboo exist? I think it all boils down to about 4 big reasons. People don't talk about money because most people don't have much money. So therefore, there's this negative association. Talking about money is proportionate to talking about problems then. If you've had more financial success in your life, then it can be easy to forget that so many people think this way. The second reason that money talk, and especially salary talk, is taboo is that because if you have a lot of money, you know what can happen to you then? Someone might ask you to borrow it. Well, lending money to family or friends is a great recipe for straining relationships. And if they're late to pay you back, then it's rude for you to even ask someone when they're going to repay you. Another reason that there's a prohibition of money talk, at least in America here is where we're talking about, is because many Americans put a higher value on privacy than other societies do. Now, I think that there are gradations of what money topics are acceptable to discuss and what are not. I'm pretty sure that I've told you on a previous show, though at this point, 300 episodes, sometimes I can forget, but I'm pretty sure that I told you that the most I ever made at my day job before quitting it more than 5 years ago was $108,000. And at times I had to work more than 40 hours a week for that. Now that might be $125K in today's inflation-adjusted dollars, but that salary was no longer that interesting to me. When my real estate, that provides value to other people, and that takes very little of my own involvement. Now, I'm kind of a rare person, actually, for me to even mention a past salary like that, even though it was in a former life of mine. In America, if something costs even more than a few $100s, maybe you shouldn't even mention it. if your friend just bought a new canoe for the lake, you might want to know how much it cost, but you're hesitant to ask them the question. So when we talk about gradations of cultural acceptance, I think that if you inquire about the cost of your friend's lunch yesterday, that's a transaction with pretty limited connections to the past and the future, and that generally is not off limits. Now, in Israel, people openly discuss salary. Why is that? Well, there are a couple reasons. It's because a place like Israel historically places a lower cultural premium on privacy. And another reason is that a place like Israel and other places in the world, they have higher levels of labor unionization. You see, once it's collective bargaining, it's not as personal. When you're a member of a labor union, you often know each other's job classification at your workplace, and then that job title, that's something that's rigidly tied to a fixed and publicly viewable salary or wage. And really, another reason for the cultural money talk taboo in America is because asking someone what they earn means that you are indirectly questioning their personal worth. I'm not saying it should be that way. I'm just saying that's what it's become. Now, by contrast, in China, personal worth is not primarily indexed to financial worth, but rather one's quality, or what they call SUZI. It's spelled SUZHI. Your moral and ethical values cannot be reduced to economic value. Yeah, I really respect that. So getting back to the Ally Bank survey, what they found is that when people do discuss finances socially, nearly one half of the survey respondents said they prefer to keep it neutral. For example, talking about price comparisons on goods and services like granola bars or a manicure, or where to find a better interest rate on a savings account. That's more acceptable to talk about. And it also found that younger people are more open to discussing money. More than any other age group, millennials, 59% of them, they acknowledge talking with others about their income, savings, and debt, even though nearly 2/3 of them agreed that it's rude or inappropriate to talk about money in a social setting. In fact, almost half, they say they disclose their income to others, and 62% say it's important for them to surround themselves with other people who feel like they are financially secure. So even kind of the second youngest generation today, millennials, they would rather be around people that are financially secure. That's really telling. Now, what I found interesting is that the survey revealed that the majority of respondents said they discuss sensitive money matters with family is 69%, with financial professionals is only 26%, and with friends is down to 22%, while only 8% said they discuss sensitive money matters with work colleagues. So that shows there that when you do talk about it, it's deemed to be a real breach of professionalism to discuss this stuff at work. So that's the place it's least likely to be discussed in American society today. And as far as what types of things people are most likely to disclose, 39% would disclose their income, only 30% their savings, and only 29% of debt. Only those percentages would disclose those things to family and friends. So that tells you that disclosing debt is the most embarrassing part of this whole money taboo topic. Like, that's the most embarrassing thing for people to talk about, debt. And of course, we're talking about mainstream society here. Hey, here at Get Rich Education, displaying the amount of good debt that you have, gee, that probably says something rather positive about the size of your real estate portfolio. Now, let's take working class communities. The money taboo can be weaker there. Jennifer Silva, she's a sociologist at Indiana University, and she researched the coal-producing region of Pennsylvania. The bottom line is that the working class families that she's interviewed, they did not hesitate to disclose specifics about their income, the amount of rent they pay, or how high their other expenses are. People would often say things like, I'm an open book, and they would be straightforward and open and not ashamed. In fact, these people freely discussed the challenges or even the impossibilities of supporting a family on minimum wage work here in these coal-producing regions of Pennsylvania. they almost acted a little proud of their resourcefulness, like how they would make their budget stretch, such as buying ground meat in bulk and then freezing portions over time to make it last. Well, you know what? From my personal vantage point here, sometimes you will be around people that make substantially less money than you. And you know what? You do find yourself tilting the conversation so that that person is not made uncomfortable. Now, what about when you go get your haircut? I mean, that 15-minute conversation that takes place between me and the person that cuts my hair, it's like if they did ask me what I did this weekend and I stayed in a resort and they already told me that they just played basketball with their kids or something else, even though basketball with your kids, that might be a greater activity in a sense than staying at a resort. I don't mention staying at a resort because it sounds hoity-toity, a little snobbish, kinda unrelatable to them. So then maybe I'll tilt that chat to NBA basketball or something. Chat about something that's not so socioeconomically stratified. You can always find that common ground with another person somewhere. You know, another personal anecdote in my life, I do a lot of these 5K running races and other events like that. The race event, with the results, when the race is done, they make my time publicly available. The local news outlets might even pick up that race's times and further publish them. Anyone can see that. Well, that is a measure of my fitness on that day. And there are clearly plenty of runners that rank both above me and below me. So that's made public, but yet salaries are not? Somehow, American society does not equate physical fitness nearly to the degree that we evaluate and stratify and maybe even glorify how much money you make. I don't know that it should be that way, but it is. I think that's rather weird. Revealing how much money you make to many people, that exposes how you're valued by your employer and how your contribution is valued even more broadly by the community. That makes an ounce of sense, I guess, sure. But why such a high value? I don't get that part. Like, few people would think you are worthless because you haven't broken the 20-minute mark in a 5K yet. But for some reason, way more people would equate you with having a lower worth if, say, they learned that you only made $54,000. Now, Eli Cook, he's a history professor at the University of Haifa, and he's the author of a book on the topic. He says that this money taboo has been going on in America for about 150 years. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, he says that a lot of Americans internalized the lessons of mainstream neoclassical economics, which suggested through the economist John Bates Clark's theory of marginal productivity that everyone earns what they in fact produced. So that's one author's opinion on about how long this has been taking place. And really what a lot of this comes down to is that the everyday conversations that you have with other people, they're really filled with questions and context about what people buy and what they do for a living, or how long they've been investing in real estate, or where they went to school. And once you know all of those things about someone else, well, you know what? The salary or the net worth or the cash flow amount, they actually become less important because all of this context that you have about others, these are all really proxies for class position anyway. So when we can stop equating net worth with self-worth, money has a chance of no longer being a taboo topic. And really, I think that is the big takeaway. I trust that you've been enjoying milestone episode 300 of Get Rich Education. As always, to get the show notes, you can go to getricheducation.com/300, since that's the episode number. And when you go there, you can often get the headshot if we have a guest on a show, as well as the links to all of the resources that were mentioned. In fact, this week, you'll find the entire transcript to the episode as well if you would like to read along, or you tell someone else about this episode and tell them about the option to read along as they listen. Again, getricheducation.com/300. Above all, I have got to thank you for listening. I hear from so many people that tell me that when they discover this show, they want to go back and listen to all 300 episodes, usually because I hear one of two things from people. They say it makes actionable real estate investing more clear than anywhere else, or that it's changed their investor mindset more than anything else. Remember, if you're interested, hang around until the very end of the show today to hear the entire uncut theme music as a little episode 300 bonus. More importantly, if you're one of those people that still has not bought your first property, you can't time the market and you can't make any money from the property that you don't own. So as long as you've been educating yourself for a while, then if you think that inexperience is the only thing holding you back, well, the only way to get that needed experience and learning is to act. Some people wait for all blue sky and everything to be perfect before they begin. Well, that really never happens. You've either got to change what you're doing or you're going to keep what you've got. And you can either teach a man to fish or give a man a fish. Well, here we do both. At Get Rich Education, we teach you how to fish, and GREturnkey.com is our sister website where we give you a fish as well with top national turnkey and other providers. So get your mortgage pre-approval and download a provider report. We give you all 8 main steps at the top of the page there. View available properties, make an offer, please get a third-party property inspection, then comes the appraisal, then sign a property management agreement, have your property closing, and finally own the property and enjoy the collected rent that your property manager automatically deposits into your bank account. Get started at GREturnkey.com. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I'll be back next week and every week to help you build your wealth. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.
Oh.